Hello everybody, we've seen all the cards for the Great Dark Beyond. Now it is time to give them ratings. And in case you've not seen one of my ratings before, normally the way I do this is I do it between 5 stars and 1 star. If a card I think is going to see play in a tier 1 deck, I give it 5 stars, tier 2, 4 stars, 3 stars. Below that, it gets a 2-star rating, or if I don't think it's going to see any play whatsoever, I'll give it a 1 star. There are some things that I sometimes bump a card up and down with. For example, if I think a card is going to see a lot of play in a lot of like tier 2 decks, I might bump it up to a 5-star because like it's a very important card, for example. And, you know, I have some wiggle room elsewhere for other things as well, as I will try to explain as I, give the ratings. Just as a pretext to this set, I actually came out of all of the reveals thinking that this was going to be one of the weakest sets ever printed for Hearthstone. I wasn't really seeing the overall vision of, this grand space idea. But having put together some decks now and, having seen what the state of Hearthstone is, especially after the nerfs, I think this isn't going to be a horrible set. I think it's actually going to be pretty, middling in terms of strength. There are some things I like about it, some things I don't like. I will say, the starships in general, I don't like. I think they're going to be generally pretty weak, with, one exception. And funnily enough, today, we're going to go over Death Knight, Demon Hunter, and Druid, who are 3 of the classes with these starships. So, without further ado, let's get down to business. We'll start with Death Knight. Death Knight has a starship package of Guiding Figure, Soulbound Spire, and Suffocate. This rewards you for getting a big Death Rattle Soulbound Spire, or just a big starship in general to get a big Death Rattle off the Soulbound Spire, which you can trigger in advance with the Guiding Figure. That is the whole gimmick of it. And while you're doing this process of building the starship pieces, which universally across all of the classes are pretty much understated cards, I will say actually the Death Knight ones are pretty okay stats for their effects, which is one of the reasons why I think this one might also work, and I've given it a little bit of love. One thing about Death Knight that is worth noting is they're probably one of the best classes to play from behind with. They've got a lot of good control options, like, you play 2 cards, I play 1 to deal with it. For example, Suffocate. While you're building the starship, you could play 1 card to destroy 2 opponents' cards. So I think there is a legitimate world where Death Knight gets to a pretty big starship, and then if you exodar the big starship to, either get a big chunk of armor, get some extra damage, get the pieces back again to do another combo, I think there's enough value there to eventually break your opponent's back with stuff. I don't think you're going to go through all of these hoops that you potentially could do. For example, we'll see in a moment there is a Reborn package which could in theory plug into this package. There is a Hand Buff package which could in theory plug into the Soulbound Spire. I think in general though, you're just going to run 3 of the 4 available starship pieces, which by the way is one of the other things I don't like about the starship pieces. I wish there were 3 per class at the very least. I feel like a lot of the decks will feel a bit samey because you're going to have to run at least 1 of the neutrals. And I think you'll run 1 neutral with this package. You'll build up your starship with these pieces, and eventually you'll get the big value on that turn. And you'll just accept along the way that you're playing some weaker turns. You may also play some other Death Rattle cards with the Guiding Figure to not only hit Soulbound Spire, but to hit some pretty other good effects. For example, Reska, for example. So I think Guiding Figure has got some additional benefits for it. Overall, though, I think there are better ways to play the Death Knight package, and I think you're going to be running this as some sort of, value-ish, slower burning deck. I've given it all 3 stars. I think, at best, this will be a tier 3 deck. I was very close to putting it into tier 4 deck territory, but there's enough intrigue, there's enough potential value from doing this that I think it could be worth it, but generally speaking, I think most decks will get under this archetype. There's then another package about reborning minions with Orkanai Deathspeaker, Wakener of Souls, Assimilating Blight, and Orbital Moon. Really weird package. I think the intention is to plug this into a Death Rattle package, which Death Knight has, because Death Knight has a card that says, when you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. Then the idea is you play that card with the Orkanai Deathspeaker to get big value from your Reborn stuff. I think it's just too many hoops to jump through to, get another copy of a X1 minion, which could fairly easily be removed. I am aware that there are combos involving Cagehead as well, but again, I think it's going to just take too long to set up that you're probably going to get killed by some sort of aggressive deck. One of the things I don't like about this package, so to speak, is that you can't play all 4 of these cards together Orbital Moon and Assimilating Blight couldn't be played together. Now, I will say, I think Assimilating Blight is a bad card, so you probably wouldn't play it in that deck, in which case, you're probably looking at some sort of like single Unholy Double Blood deck, but I just don't think that is going to be a great package, to be honest with you. Anyway, I've given Awakening of Souls, Assimilating Blight, Orbital Moon 1 star. Actually, just get back to the Awakening of Souls. We've seen a few cards like this with like huge mana costs that can cheat out another minion on top of it. It's just too slow. There's so much better unfair things you can do around 10. Stuff like Yogg, for example. In terms of Death Knight as well, you're going to be getting towards like Rescue, you're going to get towards the Primus. I just don't think Awakening of Souls getting another Death Rattle is good enough. Also, it's one of those minions that it's in the territory where classes can steal cards at that point in the game, because, you know, everyone will have got the 10 mana crystals, and if you get this stolen, it's like your key piece in the deck. It's just big sad times. Orkanite Death Speaker I've actually given 2 stars to, though, instead. This might just be splashed into a Death Rattle deck instead. And as I said, it might combo with the other card that gives Death Rattles Reborn, but you'll just ignore the rest of the package and just use this one. I think there'll be enough playtesting for that it's going to see, like, it'll be in this 2-star category, but won't work beyond that. The final package that Death Knight has is sort of like this control-y package in the form of Airlock Breach, the 8 Hands from Beyond, and Exarch Maladar. All of these cards I can see running into the same deck. This will be Control Death Knight. The 8 Hands from Beyond is going to be mainly used to kill any combo decks out there, because a lot of combo pieces need cheap cards to set up the combo that will eventually OTK you. You play your 8 Hands from Beyond at some point, just destroy all the deck with 8 cards, and one of those 8 cards in your deck will be Kil'jaeden, and that will let you go infinitely. So, yeah, I definitely see that working. We're actually not going to get till Kil'jaeden until the very end of the game, but I think almost every single control deck will put Kil'jaeden in the deck, because if you're a control deck going up against a control deck and they have it and you don't, you lose. So, yeah, I definitely think that will be a strong card, but we'll deal with that later down the line. Exarch Maladar I also think is going to be an extremely strong card on 6. There are lots of ways to generate tons of corpses, and you could cheat out like a Primus, you could cheat out, you could cheat out your Awakening of Souls if you wanted to Awakening of Souls in your deck. You can cheat out Yogg, for example. You could do a lot of really disgusting things with mana cheat, so I think this is also going to be a pretty big card. I think it's going to be in this control deck, which is going to have some like value elements on it as well. You're probably going to have like the Headless Horseman in there as well, so not only are you getting infinite demons down the line, you're getting infinite undead as well. Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty good package. So all in all, I don't actually think any control deck is going to be tier 1. I don't think we've quite pushed the boundary yet to take a control deck there, which honestly might be a good thing, because I could see a world where some of these matchups is going to last really, really, really long amounts of time. And in fact, I think that's why Kil'jaeden has got this stat scaling on the card. It's to stop games as going to the turn timer, which I think they would have done otherwise. The game becomes way more volatile at that point. If you're summoning, you know, like 18 demons and your opponent doesn't deal with it for 1 turn, you're kind of going to die, so. Anyway, that's by the by. I think these are going to be 2 4-star cards, the 8 Hands from Beyond, Exarch Maladar. Now, Airlock Breach, which I've not talked about yet, I think is a very, very good card. However, I think there are slight issues with Airlock Breach and Exarch Maladar, that you're not going to be able to generate enough corpses to do both of these things at around 6 cost. So I think once you've played one of them, you're locking the other one out for probably like 3 or 4 turns playing it. Now, it's debatable which one is better than the other one, but I decided to side with Exarch Maladar, in which case I've given Airlock Breach 3 stars instead. You might actually not run this in that deck because of that reason, that it could become a dead card. Now, on the flip side of this, there is one class out there with a deck that I think might be tier 1 to, you know, spoil the star ratings in advance, and that's Rogue. And Rogue is probably going to be a deck that will be seeking to do about 30 damage on a combo, so you might actually want to put Airlock Breach into your Death Knight deck to take your health beyond that amount so you can't get OTK'd. So I give this 3 stars, but I think this was like the most card I wish I could give a half star to. I just wanted to give it like a slight nudge down, because I think Exarch Maladar will typically be better for the most amount of times on 6 to generate a big guy. Airlock Breach, it's nice against aggro, it's nice against these combo decks, so I definitely think it probably gets into that same package as well, so I might have been a bit harsh taking a star off it. Yeah, it's just a really good card. Really good card. Control Death Knight, already good, will still be good. Then we get to Demon Hunter. And the Demon Hunter Starship mechanic is Shattershard Turret, Felfuse Battery, and Warp Drive. The intention of this deck is to swarm the board with lots of tokens, and then eventually once you've launched your starship, Shattershard Turret will give the Felfuse Battery Rush, which means you can get +1 attack on all your other minions, and in fact it'll be +2 attack because it has a Wind Fury as well. This package is garbage. I think this is the worst of the starship packages. We currently have a token deck with Parachuting Pirates, and there's a card that effectively fulfills Felfuse Battery's requirement. It's called Treasure Distributor. It has been nerfed recently, but still the nerf is fine. It's still a good card. Obviously it's taken the power level down a little bit, but it's still fairly aggressive. That is a 1-mana minion with a reasonable stat line. Not terrible. I mean, for its effect, it's a pretty good stat line. Felfuse Battery is a pretty weak stat line for 2. It's so many more hoops you have to jump through, because realistically, if you're going to launch this starship, you need to have played the Felfuse Battery and the Shattershard Turret. You have to have them both die. You then have to launch it for 5 mana. And then you also have to have your opponent to have 2 minions, by the way, because this is Rush Wind Fury. So if they don't have 2 minions on the board, you're not getting +2 attack. It's so many hoops to jump through. I've given them all 1 star. I don't even think this will see testing. I think this is such a bad mechanic that no one will try it. I will say, the only thing that would push this is Warp Drive, which is actually a really good card. 3 mana, draw 2. Discount those cards by 2. Unfortunately, they've been like hamstrung to 2 really awful cards, so I just don't see that working. Then we have Among Us Demon Hunter, as the community are now calling it, where you shuffle crewmates into your deck and shuffle them into your hand, and if you can get like chains of them together and you play one of them, you get all of them summoned from your hand. This deck literally lives and dies by emergency meeting. You play it on 2, you play the demon on 3, and then you'll have 4 mana, 8/8. That is it. That's the deal of this deck. Beyond that, the thing is, sure, you're getting like 4 mana, summon 12 stats, but it's also burning 2 cards at the same time. It almost is like saying, I play a 4 mana, 12/12, discard 2 cards. That is a pretty monstrous effect on a card. I just don't think this is going to work. By the way, I've also added Eldritch Being to this package and Zorthos, because I think the intention is that they would go into this package. Eldritch Being to shuffle your hand to try and get these crewmates together if they're not together, and Zorthos for the same reason, that you're going to play these chains of crewmates which will cause the stars to combine and collide. Anyway, I just think this package is super weak. I also think Dirger is like a really weird effect to put into this like class, or this deck even. You kind of want crewmates together in your hand, so what does Dirger do? She shuffles them into your deck. Like, generally speaking, once you've played this chain of crewmates together, the other ones in your deck are just going to be really bad draws. They're 4 mana 4/4s with a keyword on it. So, all in all, I think this package won't work. I've given Dirger, Voronai, Headhunt, and Emergency Meeting 2 stars. I don't even think this will be a tier 3 deck. I think Eldritch Being is so fucking bad that it's going to be a 1-star card. I don't think you'd run it in this deck. It's 1 mana, 1/3. That's not good enough for standard, so goodbye. Zorthos, on the other hand, I've actually given 4 stars to, and it's actually because I don't think it'll go into any of these packages. I think it'll just go into like the aggro pirate package. It's 6 mana, 5/5, deal 5 to all on the side of the board. If you're in a mirror matchup and you've put Zorthos on the board and you can get its effect to go off, you probably win the game. So I see this as like the finisher of an aggro deck. Kind of a bit like the aggro Shadow Undead Priest deck used to put Amanthul in there just to finish the game out. I can see this putting Zorthos in that deck. You play a bunch of cheap cards quickly, you zoo them up in the face, and eventually these stars will collide just naturally by you playing cards, and you'll hit your opponent's face. So I think that is going to be a pretty good card for Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter is pretty strong right now. Even post-nerfs, I think it's still going to be fairly strong. It is hard to say, though. I will concede, I should have mentioned this in the intro. Normally, I try and rate these versus, like, how the meta is right now. But the meta is so, like, disfigured because of, 1, the recent nerfs, and 2, Renathal's in the core set right now, which it won't be when this set comes out. It's actually quite hard to evaluate really what is tier 1 and tier 2 right now, or will be when we go into this set, but I still think that Pirate Aggro Demon Hunter deck is going to be pretty strong. I think at worst it'll be a tier 2 deck. Finally, we have Infiltrate, a card that doesn't beat any of the other decks that are on the board right now. Probably best in some sort of control-ish mid-range Demon Hunter deck. That won't be a thing, so 1 star. I think the card is okay, but that's about it. Would I run a weaker deck to put an Infiltrate into it? No, it's not got enough sway with me. Finally, we get to Druid. and I'm going to just combine them together. The Starship package in Druid is so intertwined with the Arcane package of Druid. Let's put them all up on the board together. I'll also say this is the one Starship mechanic that I think will work. This is going to be the best package in the set. And I feel like it's not really embracing the actual Starship deck. I think it has nothing to do with you building the Starship on the board and launching this big guy down the road. Sure, that's nice, but I don't think that's what really makes this deck. What makes this deck is Starlight Reactor's effect and Cosmic Phenomenon. The combo of these two cards is so monstrous in terms of stats that I think that alone is enough pull to make this deck work. Also worth noting, Druid are the kings, queens, everyone down the lines, the Viscounts of Mana Cheat, so you could conceivably get to this turn fairly early with like stuff like New Heights. I don't think you'll put the Dragon package into it, but you're probably going to be relying on New Heights. Maybe you'll also use Trail Mix to try and get these combos off early. And if you can do Starlight Reactor, Cosmic Phenomenon, it's such an unbelievably big tempo swing. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Drum Circle Druid, funnily enough, where you got this big board full of taunts with stats. So I think there's enough pull to do this, that the Starship package will kind of work because you want as many Starlight Reactors in your deck as possible. Also, to help this along, I think Distress Signal is very good with Starlight Reactor. It effectively becomes summon 4 guys for 0. That is very good. Arcanite Revelation with the Starlight Reactor is 1 mana, draw 2 cards, and if there's spells, you get discounts on them. And Final Frontier is a really big value card. Again, if you can get the Starlight Reactor on the board, get 2 10 cost minions from the past, you can do some really fun things. And actually, the pool of 10 costs from the past is pretty strong. It has Yogg in it as well, so praise Yogg. I will be your follower, I will be your believer. We will try and make this happen. Now, here's where things get a little bit funky. By the way, I think this is going to be a tier 2 deck, so I'm giving all of those cards 4 stars. Here's where things get funky, though. I don't think that, firstly, Astral Phase will make the cut of this deck. I think this card is so bad that even though Druid has such a lack of arcane cards in the set, that you won't put this card in your deck. It's just too weak. The other thing I've got a bit of a hot take about is I don't think Shatari Cloakfield will get into the Druid deck with the Starship pieces. I think you'll run Arcanite Defense Crystal for survivability, and that will be it. You will just run 4 cards. Because you don't really care about the Starship. You don't super care about the size of it. Of course, a big Starship that you launch down the line is going to be a big tempo swing for you. But I think what you're realistically going to do is you're going to put the Exodar in this deck, and you'll Exodar your Starship at some point to get the Starlight Reactors back in your hand, so you can combo them with more arcane spells. You'll also probably put Mr. Vista in this deck. You'll probably put the other big 7 mana arcane spell from Druid into this deck, which, you know, is Choose Thrice. That'll go into this deck, and it'll just be this big value dump of cards, and eventually you'll generate some ginormous board with ENR and the Cosmic Phenomenons and all the stats you get from this. By the way, the Starlight Reactors as well, if 2 of them die, will stack together, so when you launch the Exodar, you're going to have some bonkers turn, I'm telling you that for certain. I just don't think the 1 mana discount on your first spell with Shatari Cloakfield is going to be enough draw to put that in your deck, so these 2 cards I think are going to be put into this deck in some decks, but eventually will be dropped, so I've given them both 2 stars. Finally, Exarch Othar. This is going to be my hot take of the day. I don't think Exarch Othar is going to make the final cut of this deck at the highest of high levels. The problem with this card is there's so many arcane spells out there that are just deal damage. And the problem with that is that Starlight Reactor doesn't say to enemies, it's just randomly. So you're going to hit your own board with the arcane spells. Also, you might accept that because you're going to get a big, huge stat line of stuff on your side of the board. You're just not going to get the 2 mana cost cheat. You're going to be hitting like, not Arcane Bolt. What's the, oh no, it is Arcane Bolt, right? The Hunter one. You're going to be hitting a bunch of like 1 and 2 mana Hunter spells. They have such minor effects that, sure, it's 4 mana, 3/3, draw 3, but I think 2 of those cards are going to be really, really garbage. That being said, though, I think at the current time you will probably put Exarch Othar in the deck, but it's going to be the card that makes like the 28th, 29th, and 30th card in the cut, so I've actually demoted it to 3 stars instead. If this archetype gets any more support down the line with more arcane spells that are good, Exarch Othar might be your first cut for this, because I think generally speaking the effect is pretty weak. Again, on the flip side though, if another class gets a big arcane package and they're really good, then Exarch Othar moves up the ranking, so it's kind of going to be on a sliding scale with this deck, and I think currently it's at the bottom end of it. The final two cards are Ulu, the Everdrifter, as the community are now calling it Uwu, and Stargrazer. Druid has a lot of reasons to run a big statted minion, basically because they can mana cheat and get them out earlier. Now, this does mean, though, that the bar of quality on these ginormous cards is very high, because Druid can run Titans, for example, and cheat them out earlier. And the Titans, basically for this entire, last year from expansions, has been extremely, extremely strong. And I don't think Stargrazer or Uwu are going to be good enough. In fact, I actually think Uwu is just a bad card. I think it's one of the worst legendaries of this set. All in all, I think these are both going to be 1-star cards. There's just better things that Druid can cheat out than these two cards. Anyway, that'll do it for the first star reveals. Oh my god, I can never remember the order of these. I'm going to go through them alphabetically so you can work out which 3 I'm going to do tomorrow. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, why don't leave a like and subscribe? Everything helps me out, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye!